That's what I came across.
Yeah, I could totally be at something like, well, they flew past the industrial park by a ways, and then turned around and came back, because that's actually kind of the direction they needed to go for their mission, which was over the Adriatic Sea. It's off to the east, so I could see where they went west, turned around, coming back, something happens, and then bang.
Yeah, but we don't know what direction it was traveling when it impacted the ground.
No.
Okay.
We don't know that. And
okay.
It's one of those things. There's a lot of the details on this stuff are kind of skimpy, unfortunately.
It's because the documents keep disappearing.
And it's frustrating. But as far as him choosing the wrong glide path and missing his objective, that seems like kind of a boneheaded mistake if he was that experienced of a pilot.
I could actually see, though, I could see a guy being very confident and he's going to get these engines restarted. So he spends, let's say, 30 or 40 seconds longer than he should trying to get the engines, which you are saying in this supposed scenario died. He's trying to get them restarted, and by spending too long on that, he loses that window of opportunity to get himself spun about and on a good path heading back.
Yeah. Or, it could be, too, that he actually was a really selfless guy, and that he chose to crash into an industrial park because it's less populated than a residential area. So maybe he crashed it there on purpose.
It wasn't that busy of an area, though.
Maybe he realized,
Did you look at the aerials of that place?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not densely populated.
Not
and this
quite
is
like, the Venice we know, which is pretty densely populated.
Right, so I question that. That's all.
Yeah. Well, let's get back from that. Let's look at another couple of options for pilot error. Another one would be a stall with a tailspin. So you guys know what a tailspin is, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Spinning.
Yeah.
Horizontal to the ground.
By the tail.
Yeah. And actually usually kind of vertical to the ground, kind of like headed towards the ground and spinning around. Yeah, like you say. And then,
by the tail.
Yeah.
Corkscrewing, would that be a way
kind of corkscrewing down, yeah. And this is something I learned how to do in Flight Simulator. Actually, you go up till you stall, and then put the rudder on one way or the other, and then you'll just sort of go over to one side and start spinning. And it's pretty easy to handle in Flight Simulator. I gotta say. Yeah.
You are never piloting us anywhere.
No, probably not a good idea. But the airplane was, as far as I know, still gaining altitude, so I could see where, when you're gaining altitude, you're going to be going slower than just flying level and straight, right? Maybe possible the pilot and co-pilot didn't realize that they were going slower, kind of, and they were heading towards the stall. Maybe their stall indicator was broken, which is not unheard of.
Yeah.
And supposing, say, the pilot was putting the plane into a turn, and then just right about then the plane stalls, well, he winds up at a tailspin. Which are, as I said, generally recoverable as long as you have enough altitude to work with.
You get to be high enough off the ground,
Yeah, because stunt flyers do them all the time, and of course I do them in Flight Simulator, and it works out fine for me. But I usually like a big margin even in Flight Simulator. But from what I read on the interwebs, and yes, of course, there is at least one web forum devoted to nothing other than flying the DC-3.
Of course.
Yeah. And lots of good information out there. But according to these guys, the DC-3/C-47 doesn't actually recover so well from tailspins.
It's an oddly shaped plane.
Yeah. They call
in terms of its proportions.
Yeah. I just like in the script he says, and they're not recommended.
Yeah. Tailspins?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
I mean, this plane is 1/3 wider on its wings than it is long, because it's 63 feet long and it's 95 feet across from wingtip to wingtip, which for our folks on the other side, that's 19 meters by 29 meters. So I can see how that would be rather ungainly and difficult to pull out of a spin.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's of course, but of course, those big old wings could generate a lot of lift.
Well, that's what they're for, yeah.
And that's why the DC-3 was so great. It could land in short little spaces and stuff like that. So it's really good for all that kind of stuff. A very versatile plane. There's still some around, actually, even today, flying.
There are a few left, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, we used to have one right here in Portland at OMSI. Did you ever see that thing?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, years ago at the old OMSI up by the zoo, they had a DC-3 on public display there for many, many years.
I remember that.
You remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, when they moved down to the river, they got rid of it, which kind of, actually, I'm still kind of angry about. That was really cool. I'm sure they sold it to somebody who's going to restore it if they haven't already.
Is it not at the Aviation and Space Museum?
I don't know. Maybe.
I would
Maybe
presume
that's
that's where it would go.
I would think that's where they'd send it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they didn't sell it to a scrapyard or something
probably
like
not.
that.
Yeah.
No.
You would think not. Let's pray they didn't do that. Well, anyway, where were we? Oh, yeah, tailspins. I don't know. I think the pilots would have had to have been really kind of asleep at the switch for this to happen. Although it was early, maybe they hadn't had their coffee. Did I mention they took off at 7:30 in the morning?
Yes.
Maybe they just hadn't had enough coffee, and maybe they. But it just seems like that'd be such a boneheaded mistake to make.
That's a pretty big stretch.
Yeah, it kind of is. And there's one more possibility into the pilot error theory, which is that the C-47/DC-3 had a little design flaw in its engines. I don't know if you guys researched this at all, but and I'll talk about that in a minute. So if the captain Borrell was it Borrell?
Just say it how you're going to say it.
Borrell was unaware of this problem, or for some reason he chose to ignore it, then I suppose that could have caused a little bit of an existential crisis on the plane.
Okay.
And so I'll explain what the problem is in a second here.
Okay.
So that would be a combination kind of mechanical malfunction plus a little bit of error on the part of our pilot.
And have we said, by the way, that the pilot error is the most popular theory according to the original investigations?
Yeah, well, not most popular theory, but the original investigation, that's what
according to the original investigation, it was the most popular.
It was the most popular theory, as in that's what everybody believed,
right,
including the public and everybody.
In the beginning, that's what the investigators said, yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
They were the ones who were saying, it was totally pilot error.
Oh, I know. Why
investigate anymore? It's totally pilot error.
Well, that doesn't mean it was the most popular theory. It just means that it was the one they chose to believe.
It was a government opinion, which is always the most popular. According to the new regime.
I don't know where you live.
The government's opinion is always the most popular.
Yeah,
so what's our next theory?
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk about another theory. I can just see the 1973 version of the internet. Government says pilot error. Heck yeah, I like that a lot.
Well, let's start a letter writing campaign.
It was a different internet back in those days.
It was, yeah.
It totally was. Well, what's our next theory? Mechanical malfunction. So as I just mentioned, there was a little bit of an issue with those engines. Of course, this is a prop plane. It's not a jet. Prop plane. Got piston engines.
Mm-hmm.
And you all, I'm sure, know how piston engines work. If not, pause and go out and do a little work on the internet and see if you can figure that out.
I'm going to have to do some work on the internet.
Yeah. The manufacturer, McDonnell Douglas, recommends running these engines full out as much as possible. And the reason for that is apparently with this particular engine, if you run it at less than full RPMs for long periods of time, then deposits will form at the head of the cylinder at the top of the piston stroke from unburned fuel residue.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll wind up with a nice hard ring at the top of your cylinder on the inside. Got that? That makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I get engines. So yeah,
and so apparently, if you run the engines full out all the time, then that ring does not appear. But if you're running your engine at lower RPMs, then you'll wind up developing that ring probably.
And the thing about not running it at full RPMs, at least this is my understanding based on a guy I knew years ago who was a pilot, is he said you typically don't want to be running your airplane's engines at high RPMs all the time. You want to be at just the low enough RPM that you've got speed and you keep lift, but you're not maxing it out, so you're trying to keep it at a lower RPM. Does that make sense? It's kind of like your car.
Yeah.
I can drive at 3,000 RPMs in second gear or 2,000 RPMs in third gear, and I'm going to get better mileage, and it's better for the engine.
Yeah, and
it's the same thing. So I can understand a pilot who got the same kind of advice this guy gave me.
Yeah, let's run
let's run it at lower RPMs all the time.
Well, yeah, you're going to get better fuel economy and stuff like that. Sure. And
so the theory goes that the ring somehow interferes with the engine.
Yeah, this ring. Yeah, this hard ring of residue. Mm-hmm. Essentially, what happens is that if you've been running your engine at less than full RPMs regularly a lot, then you get that ring, and then if suddenly, for some reason, with this particular engine, if you suddenly gun it up to full RPMs, what happens is your piston, which, and you know what a piston ring is, right? Not the same as a ring on the inside of the cylinder. The piston rings actually can hit that hard ring on the inside of the cylinder and break.
Oh,
And
that's a problem.
That's a big problem.
Okay.
It's kind of in the engine world. That's kind of catastrophic, actually.
Yeah.
Because those rings keep the oil that's in the engine from going into the fuel system and vice versa. And if they start to mix, really bad things happen.
Right.
Yeah, and on top of that, just having these things break into pieces and being stuck between the piston and the cylinder wall is also and getting ground in. And stuff.
Oh yeah, they're
That's
gonna beat
good.
the hell out of everything.
Yeah.
They're gonna destroy it quite quickly.
Yeah, it's
Because
bad news.
the engines tend to go at several thousand revolutions per minute. That's what RPMs are. You can just see how quickly that's just going to destroy something.
Oh yeah, you wind up. Yeah, your whole engine can just fly to pieces. I'll get an email from at least one mechanic about that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Always change your oil.
Yeah. That actually is good advice. And rotate your tires also.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's imagine that you're flying Argo 16 one fine November morning. Suddenly your left engine gives out. And that's not a huge problem because all you got to do is crank up the right engine to make up for some of that power loss. But under the certain circumstances, of course, this can cause our right engine to fail too. And that's when things get a little serious. That's what I'm talking about, pilot error, because Captain Borrell should have been aware of this issue with these engines.
Theoretically.
Theoretically, he should have been. And, again, this is all supposition on my part, too, because we don't know how he ran his plane. He piloted this thing all the time. He might have run it full out 24/7. I don't know. But just supposing, and this guy went on long flights over the Adriatic on his radar sniffing missions. I would not be surprised if he didn't run it full out all the time because fuel economy and all that stuff. But I guess if that's what happened, I suppose you could argue that pilot error did contribute to that crash.
So here's another question for you.
Yeah.
Is that the sort of, are those rings, could they form if you were just sitting on the ground with your props running?
It takes a while.
It does take a while.
It takes a while for deposits like that to accumulate
We're talking
in an
like
engine.
Yeah, we're
days,
talking-
weeks.
Hours and hours.
months,
Lots and
months,
hundreds of
Okay.
hours of operation.
Okay.
Yeah, it takes a long time. It's not
Okay.
going to happen just that morning or
Sure.
anything
It's
like
the
that.
same thing. Have you seen those hideous commercials from like Chevron where they show the super cruddy engine?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
I mean,
takes
that's
a
what
long time to happen.
Right, of course. I mean,
And it's the